All right. So yeah, through the wonders of modern technology, here we are. It's been a minute since I've used Zoom. I taught with it like a few years ago, but yeah, still just kind of working out the kinks. But thanks for your patience, Danielle and everybody else. Um, I'm going to just plug a few different library programs before we get started here. And if you've been to a library presentation, you've heard me repeat this stuff over and over again, but just bear with me for a second. We have the Pages for Pizza program, and we teamed up with Reeves just next door. And if you do 4 reading sessions, you can get a free single topping personal pan pizza from Reeves, which I think pound for pound is the best pizza in North Iowa. And you don't have to come to the library to do it. You just get a bookmark from the library, and your parents or your teacher or a librarian can fill it out, and you can redeem that at Reeves. I'm going to be starting a chess club at the library in the new year. So just keep an eye out for that. I'm thinking we might meet twice a month, but we'll see how it goes. If you don't know how to play chess, that's fine. We can learn how. I know how the pieces move. I don't know any strategy, but it could be fun to learn that together. And I'm going to have a short story club, the Quick Read Roundtable. So if you don't have time to invest in a full novel, we can just keep it short and sweet. And I usually try to keep the reading time less than an hour for the short stories that we read. And then we meet, and it's basically just like a book club. And then lastly, we got a new website for the new year. I've been building it for a little while now, but it'll be accessible and live just after the new year. So a lot of the events and different information that I put on Facebook, I'll just kick to the website too. So it'll be in both places. And we're gonna do a little quick introduction here of Danielle. And full journalistic disclosure, she is my sister-in-law. Sitting in her grandparents' home right now.
I mean, it's kind of yours now,
But I feel like we have some good sort of karmic energy. Like you have your grandma's chicken collection behind me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can see it, but I have my grandparents.
There were a lot of chickens at the birth of Jesus, as we all know.
My grandma's Mary and Joseph amongst the chickens. But yeah. So for Danielle, a little background, and we'll get into some of the particulars through the interview. But graduate of Carleton in 2005, and you studied English. You can feel free to correct me if I'm if I'm getting it wrong here.
That's all right.
So in 2010, you graduated from George Washington with a graduate degree in global communications, and you spent 4 years at U.S. News and World Report, where you covered the economy, campaign finance, demographic issues, and you were an associate editor there. And you were able to launch something called Data Mine, which I hope we'll get to talk about a little bit just in our conversation, a data visualization blog that was associated with U.S. News and World Report. And you were at Vox for a year, just with the original reporting team, covering economics and business. I'm kind of curious about that too. How you went from English, global communications to econ and business. And I did a lot of research for this interview, prepared thoroughly. I checked out the David Frost interviewing Nixon. I checked out Oprah and the royal family. I checked out Triumph, the insult comic dog interview of Eminem and the VMAs.
Your technique is excellent so far. Good job.
I'm really hoping to be on point with this. All right, you ready, Danielle?
Yeah.
Okay, question 1.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any particular memories of the Titonka library growing up? I've always been a library person myself, but yeah, I don't know anything about the library before it existed as it does now.
Yeah, most of my memories of the library are from summers, because in the summer we'd spend a lot of time at my grandma's house. My grandma lived just across from the pool. So when we weren't at the pool, which was most of the time, I would go down to the library, and there was a girl I went to elementary with who lived next to the pool. Her name was Jennifer. She and I would walk down to the library. There was story time. We would sometimes sit and listen, and also just sort of page through the books. I remember there was a vast collection of like bodice rippers. It always, it always felt as if like I should not be reading these. Maybe I should back off.
No, that's awesome.
So
No,
that was how
I-
I
yeah.
tested my limits as a kid. I don't know.
Was there a distinct smell to the library? I feel like for the library growing up around where I lived, it's like, I don't know, there's something about the smell of books.
Yes. No, I mean, it smells like old paperbacks. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. Kind of musty, but that's
Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah.
It's character. Uh, so what are some things you did while growing up in rural Iowa that may be sort of mundane for folks around here, but it could be intriguing for your non-Midwestern colleagues in journalism? You have any just sort of activities off the top of your head that you know, if you brought up to your friends like that are NPR, they'd be like, that's different.
They've probably, I mean, a lot of them have probably heard me go on about it already, but you know, showing pigs at the county fair
Oh
is
yeah.
definitely up there. Like not just raising animals, but scrubbing them with shampoo and bringing them in a trailer to a town half an hour away and visiting them a couple times a day and walking them around a ring. And like in retrospect, objectively, like animal shows are a little bizarre because like there are all of these rules and etiquette about, you know, keep eye contact with the judge, which I don't know why that was a thing. It was
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it was just but there was a very certain culture about it, and like I loved doing it. It was the best. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. That's number one. I have told people about just my high school in general. A lot of people are surprised at how small it is and just how small in population a lot of things are. You know, when I you know, I'll tell them about how, you know, my high school had what 100 when I was there, 170, 160 people, maybe 180, I don't know. And I've had people say, is it private? Like, no, it's not private. That's just who's there. Or and then, you know, in the winter, people would ride their snowmobiles in. That's unusual. I mean, a fair amount of it is unusual to people who grew up in more dense places.
Did you guys have a day like where seniors could drive their tractors to school or something? Like I've seen that with I don't know. I've seen it at some maybe even Forest City or something.
Yeah. There was a day when like, so the high school in Buffalo Center is like just right in the middle of town, and it's situated on this big 2-block block. And there was a day, it must have been like, I don't remember which day it was. I think the seniors got out a little earlier than everyone else. It was like the day after we got out. You'd drive in circles around the school. And I remember one year some people had megaphones and just kind of be a very light nuisance to the people inside. Like it was never that bad. It was never the level of like, you know, disturbing the peace, I don't think. It was just like kind of being low-key stupid for half a day. Yeah.
No, that's solid. Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned Buffalo Center. What was the chronology of schools that you attended while you were in North Iowa?
Yeah, I went to Titonka Elementary and Titonka Middle School, and then I went to North Iowa High School in Buffalo Center and graduated from there in 2001.
Okay, cool. And do you have any, I don't know, teachers that stick out to you, you know, from high school or from younger age, you know, anybody that left an impression on you?
Yes, quite a few. Mrs. Post, Mary Post, was my 5th grade teacher in Titonka, and she just really encouraged me to write. And she I remember taught us about books that she liked. Like I remember I think it was her that introduced me to Roald Dahl. Like I didn't know who that was. And you know, James and the Giant Peach and the BFG and the Witches and all of those, like, which are, you know, kind of dark kids books, but and probably for that reason, I just loved them. They were the best.
Yeah.
You Yeah, she had us do like free writing, and she loved creative writing. So I really loved her. Aside from that, in high school, I really think of Mrs. Angstman, who taught, I mean, both the Angstmans are great. And also, speaking of bias, they are the parents of probably my best friend in high school. And
Oh, okay. Yeah.
right
Molly's.
now, but still, Mrs. Angstman taught Spanish, but also classic literature. And she
I didn't
taught
know that.
us how to, write a paper and write it well. And
Yeah.
just the basics of how to do that. And I was so thankful once I got to college that someone had taught me how
Yeah.
to write a paper well and like do citations and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I would also add probably Mr. Kakachik, who taught chorus at our high school, just because like
Mhm.
I was always impressed at like we clearly weren't a big school, and he always got us to like we had a choir and a musical that were far better than we had any right to be at a place that small. He was just very good at getting people to sing well and also to be excited about it. And to this day, I have no idea how he did it.
Man, that's nice. It's good you have some good influences there. And I've I've talked to the Carol Ticky from Titonka, and she always says that she remembers when you played the piano for a musical when you were quite young. It was like, all right, the production's counting on you, little Danielle. Don't stay at the piano and don't run around.
They gave me arguably too much responsibility at a very young age.
But, she always says nice stuff about you.
Well, that's
Yeah. And what were some of your favorite subjects in school? You mentioned chorus was a cool class.
yeah.
A few other teachers, but did you have anything that you really maybe was your number one favorite?
I really liked math. I mean, I liked English no matter what. Like that was just going to be a given no matter who was teaching it.
Mhm.
I mainly because I liked reading. I liked math. I liked Spanish quite a bit.
Mhm.
I liked science. Another teacher is Mr. Blodgett, who taught a lot of our science classes in North Iowa. He was just also very good at making it fun and also at explaining really complicated things.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were definitely my favorite classes.
I mean, that's a rarity, though. I mean, I feel like a lot of people are sort of just left brain or right brain, and they gravitate towards like the humanities or the hard sciences. But I mean, that's cool. You've got a good foundation with all of that.
Yeah, well, I think with math and science also, I think part of the relief of them is that like you could, like there was a right answer and a wrong answer,
Yeah.
Whereas with a paper or your opinion on The Great Gatsby or whatever,
Yeah.
there are a million answers and they're all kind of right, maybe. And it's a question of how you phrase them. It was just nice to have black and white
Yeah.
subjects. Yeah.
I could understand that. So, I mean, when you were in high school, did you have any sort of opportunities to dip your toes in journalism at all? Did you have a school paper or any sort of opportunity to write for a local paper at all?
We didn't have a school paper. We let's see. No, we didn't have a school paper. We did have I did do a little writing for the Globe Gazette in Mason City. There was a teen page, and I wrote a few columns for it that are mortifying to read now.
Do you remember what the topic was?
Oh God.
Was it a humor? Was it a think piece?
It was humor. Yes.
Okay.
At the time, I, like all cool teenage girls, was into Dave Barry. So I wrote I wrote one about being the band queen, like one column. I wrote another one. About how everybody at my school was obsessed with the card game 500 at one point. It was just
So you
random
really
stuff.
tuned into the
Yes, I had my finger on the pulse
Yeah.
teen culture at the time. And my sister-in-law looked up looked some of these up ahead of my wedding last year and
Mhm.
let me know that she was aware of their existence. And I told her in no uncertain terms that I would disown her if she brought them into her wedding toast or anything like that. So fortunately she did not.
Shoot. Oh man. Yeah, the library has a search tool for Titonka topics too. I meant to mention that at the beginning, but if you ever are feeling nostalgic, I'm sure your name pops up there at some point.
Yes.
But I was teasing Rachel, my wife Rachel, it's Danielle's sister. Um, I saw her letter to Santa in the Titonka topic, just doing a quick little search on
Oh,
the thing, and she started off by asking Santa, "How is yourself?" And been kind of teasing her on that past few weeks, but at any rate, um, so yeah, so you had some with the Globe Gazette, some sort of like concrete experience with journalism, and that's pretty cool. That's a interesting sort of opportunity for a high school kid.
yeah.
Um, and let's see, did you know you wanted to be a journalist at that point after you saw your name next to the Globe Gazette Dave Barry headline? Were you like, this is it? This is my future, or was it a something you came into later on?
Like sort of. I was fascinated by the news. I like mom and dad got Newsweek and I thought it was the greatest thing to get this just weekly compendium of here's what's happening, and it not just near you, not just in your town, but everywhere. And to uh just be, I remember just thinking, oh, people get to just write down what happens for a living. That sounds great. So I always liked the idea of it. But God, if you had asked me at the time what I wanted to be, part of me might have said doctor, like a I just a nebulous doctor, no specialty, just that. I had very dim ideas of what I wanted to do. I really couldn't have told you. I think I was kind of adrift. It wasn't until like college and even a little after that I really settled on, yes, I want to be a journalist.
Okay, yeah, I mean that makes sense just from what you've explained so far. I mean, it sounds like you've had a lot of interests, academically, and I mean, I feel like probably for someone like yourself that, I mean, there's good a lot of different things. It could be hard to sort of narrow it down. It seems like such an imposing sort of decision to make, when you're 18 years old, even when you first start college. Um, so yeah, I mean, it seems like it would take a while to narrow it down.
Well, I mean, I feel like at the time of graduating college, I thought, man, so many people seem to know what they want to do with their lives. Because I knew people going off to med school or law school or
Yeah,
going off to teach. And just immediately it was like, oh,
yeah,
you have a career, congratulations. Whereas, a lot of us were admin assistants or bartending or waitressing, which is a fine career, of course, but it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. And I just thought, like, how do you decide? It turns out that looking back now that, oh, no, very few people that I know, like roughly my age, are in the same field now that they were in at 23. And of course it's changed. It's just at that age, it feels like life or death to find your career immediately.
oh, I know. There's so much stress, and you can look back. I mean, even when you're a senior in college, you're just ridiculously young,
Yes.
and you just don't know what you're doing. But
Mhm.
but yeah. Um, let's see. In what ways did Titonka, North Iowa region prepare you to be a journalist? You mentioned the concrete example with the Globe Gazette, but uh, is there something maybe more abstract, or I don't know, something about growing up in this particular area that influences your reporting? Um, I I had a history professor say that all historians write about themselves, or that no matter what we do, whether it's the topics we gravitate towards writing about, or whether it's just our actual writing voice, that our socialization comes through in that. And I was just curious if you've reflected on maybe your socialization and how it relates to your
Yeah.
writing.
No, I've thought about it a lot, really, because I do come from a place that is quite different from where a lot of people who run in my circles out here
Mhm.
come from. A lot of them are from, um, you know, suburbs or big cities and more affluent places, for example. I mean, I could go on all night, so I'll just try to keep it to a few. As far as covering politics goes, I mean, one
Mhm.
thing that helps is like having grown up. Like I talk to a lot of voters. A big part of my job is going to this campaign rally or that campaign rally and
Mhm.
listening to the candidate talk, listening to Kim Reynolds talk or Chuck Grassley or whoever,
Mhm.
and then talking to voters and saying, hey, what did you think? Do you like the candidate? Do you not? Why not?
Mhm.
I, it certainly helped to grow up religious, because a lot of voters are religious, and I
Mhm.
feel like, and not certainly not every voter, but also not every journalist is. So to be
Mhm.
able to be conversant in that,
Yeah.
and just be able to like connect with someone on that level, being like, no, I understand what it means to believe in uh, God and the various teachings, rules, et cetera, that come along with that, and the
Yeah.
culture that comes along with that.
Mhm.
That sort of thing has helped. And also just, I feel like, I don't know if this is a rural area thing or what. My pet theory is that if you grow up in a place with a limited number of people, you learn early on that you're just gonna have to you have to get along with everybody. You're just get like, whether they like you, whether you like them, you know what, you're stuck with them. And so like you you'd better put up with each other and learn how to deal with each other. And I feel like there's a certain amount of empathy that comes with that.
Mhm.
And empathy is really important when you're walking up to people with a microphone constantly and trying to put them at ease,
Yeah.
and show them that, no, I am not standing here judging you. No, I don't care what your answers are. I care that you give me answers.
Yeah.
Uh, I think there's that. A couple of other things, though, that
Mhm.
I think that coming from Northern Iowa have imprinted upon me. One is a sort of reverse thinking about, from what you might expect about in terms of coming from real America, as the way that a lot of people put, the heartland and farm country and that sort of thing. It is
Mhm.
very easy, I think, and I definitely thought this way for a while, to think, oh, well, I'm from real America. I am from, I am salt of the earth, as are the people that I grew
Yeah.
up with. And like, it turns out real America is everywhere, and
Yeah.
it's what growing up there did teach me is that, like, yes, this place is unique, but I mean, very cookie cutter suburban subdivisions aside, yeah, but I mean, like, there are very particular cultures to any given place, and plenty of places, not just rural wherever, that are underrepresented and
Mhm.
that need their stories told. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was a really good reflection. I mean, I didn't really thought about some of that stuff because that's the sort of question I think about too. I've just been in North Iowa for a few years. I kind of have a little bit of an outsider perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and what makes it unique, sort of what perspectives can it give you? But yeah, everything you said really makes sense to me, and that it sort of resonates. Um, so, getting back to just your time at U.S. News World Report at
Mhm.
Vox, um, how long did it take you to find your writing voice? Uh, and maybe I'm just making up a, a term here, um, but is it something that you know, you sort of chipped away at over time? Is it something that alters depending on, the medium?
I mean, you don't get, in terms of writing news, you don't get much of a voice. I
Yeah.
mean, if you pick up a newspaper or go to most news websites, a lot of stories are written in what is often called like the voice from nowhere, the voice that says, today at the White House, Joe Biden did blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
today in Des Moines, da, 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 where
Mhm.
you're trying to take yourself out of it. That's part of trying to be unbiased and
Mhm.
objective. And we
Yeah.
can get into what that means or doesn't mean. So I remember when I wrote my first couple news stories at US News, looking up other stories, just any story, and being like, all right, what do I have to mimic here? Like,
Yeah.
what am I going for? Because
Mhm.
I want to just know the basics of how this is supposed to sound. And I mean, the thing is, once you get used to that, you can start to inject a little personality into it, to, a different rhythm, occasionally when the story
Yeah.
calls for it, a little humor or irony. But that's about what you get. It's
Mhm.
mostly in, book review, more like book reviews give you a bit more freedom. I write some of those, and you can be a little more loose and creative with those. And, whatever writing I do on the side, that's more it. And
Mhm.
as far as finding that voice, I mean, everyone has their own way of doing it. And mine is often writing the way that I talk, which
Mhm.
means, kind of rambling and and trying to be funny, maybe not always succeeding, but yeah, I'll leave it
All
there.
right. Yeah. Do you have like a certain reading level that you're aiming for when you're writing just sort of expository stuff? Like it's not your blog, it's not your not even like analysis really, but just this thing happened.
Yeah, I
File.
mean, the when it comes to just writing a news story, like today, I'll just go with, today on the campaign trail, the Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin said XYZ. It's not so much reading or vocabulary level as two things. One is to be like very clear and direct,
Mhm.
to keep from writing long multi-clause sentences. And that's important enough online or in print, but it's super important in radio.
Mm.
Radio writing is a little different from other writing, in that you want your sentences short. You have to be very concise, to the point, and make sure that as someone is listening to you, they're not getting lost in your logic. You just need to make everything very, very plain.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I never really thought about before, but it makes total sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've heard some statistic thrown around that like just hearing certain things, you only pick up so much. I mean, I don't know if it was a teaching class, like when I'm giving a lecture, it's like just understand that only 33% of what you're saying is going to register just audibly in your students' brains. That's like best case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I guess radio is like no different. You really have to probably treat every word with just
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, when I worked at Vox, especially, which was a new website, it's important that it was a new website, because and my bosses were obsessed with metrics, with how many people are clicking on your story,
yeah.
and also how much of it are they reading. And
Mhm.
we had the ability to look and see how far down people are scrolling before they leave your story.
Hmm.
And it turns out a lot of people read the first couple paragraphs and then
Yeah,
leave.
yeah.
And so, I mean, one other general rule of thumb is your best quotes, your best facts, your most important stuff, put it up top. And don't save it to have a really great kicker at the end, because 80% of people aren't going to get to that. So
Yeah.
put all the good stuff up high.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, how do you feel about like there's some news outlets that just always give story highlights at the beginning,
Yeah.
like bullet point type stuff. Is that something that, was there any sort of pushback to that sort of style when that became more popular, would you say? Or I don't
No,
know.
we did some of that at Vox. We, excuse me, we don't do that at NPR really, but
Mhm.
I don't know if there's pushback to that. I think it's just a matter of preference and also norms. It's possible that will catch on more as more new startups decide what they're going to do. It is something that works best in breaking news or in things that can be summed up, as opposed to what are the effects of this Supreme Court decision? Like, well, you could go on for forever about the knock-on effects of any given thing. But today, Joe Biden gave a speech about blah, blah, blah. And what does that mean? You can summarize that in a few bullet points. So it depends on the story,
Yeah, that's true. And, for me, I've consumed news my whole life, back when I was an undergraduate, we get free newspapers. I'd have my New York Times, my USA Today, my Cincinnati Enquirer, and I'd sit in the library and just like file through the old papers.
A
But
very broad media diet you had for a college kid. Yes.
but I've never understood how stories get written. Like, what's the process? And yeah, I was curious as if you could maybe walk through a step-by-step sort of guide, and it might vary depending on the medium.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not as many steps. Maybe it's not as like as mysteriously complex of a process as I imagine. But I don't
Well,
know.
but
I was just curious to see if you could uncover the veil of from idea to paper or
sure. Yeah.
radio.
I mean, definitely to me, the hardest and most intimidating part of the whole thing is coming up with story ideas. Unless it is just an event like, hey, go to this protest, do a story on what happens. Like that's, the idea is done. The hard part is just gluing everything together. But coming up with the idea is hard. So step one is having the idea. So either you're just doing the event or often it'll be something like, I notice a phenomenon, like ahead of a presidential election, I'll say, I'll go to my editor and say, a lot of voters have been telling me such and such. Like I remember in 2020, ahead of the primaries and caucuses, a lot of voters were saying, I would like to vote for, this is Democratic voters, I would like to vote for Elizabeth Warren. I would like to vote for Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg or whatever, but I don't know if other people will vote for him or her because I fear that other voters are sexist or homophobic or racist. I had a lot of voters telling me that. And eventually I heard it enough that I went to my editor and I was like, this is a thing that is happening.
Yeah.
And so then you talk to your editor, that's step two, and your editor both, cuts and tells you what to keep in your stories, but also is largely your sounding board, the person who you go to with an idea and they either tell you, no, that's terrible, or they tell you it's great, or they tell you work on it more. So once
How
you
frustrating is that process? That is there any sort of back and forth? Is there a give and take? Is it like market driven? You mentioned the click counter and the scroll measure? Is there certain keywords where they're like, yes, that's so hot right now?
A thing that I like about NPR is that since we are not as driven by advertisers, we are driven more by people donating and sponsors and grants and that sort of thing. We are less bound to doing the stories that get people to click, which means, like early on in Trump's run, we didn't have the motives that places like CNN had. CNN infamously would put a whole Trump rally on television, and a big thing was, well, people will watch it. It'll get a lot of eyeballs, which means a lot of ad revenue. And we would cover it, but we certainly weren't putting it on live.
Mhm.
Because I mean, first of all, because you can make the very, very reasonable argument that there isn't a lot of news value to covering any candidate's full speech. Like, why should you?
Yeah.
But also, we just aren't driven by being like, holy cow, millions of people are listening to this, and it's gonna
Mhm.
really bring in the bucks.
Mhm.
So that drives us less, but that is definitely a consideration at some places. Yeah. Um, yeah. But as far as the give and take that you asked about between me and the
Mhm.
editor,
Mhm.
it's pretty fluid. Your editor ends up being you just talk to them so much, and um, check in with them, tell them what you're doing, and they start to understand, and you start to understand like what each other likes, what each other
Mhm.
is good at, and also just you develop a thick skin where if your editor says,
Mhm.
nope, that's bad, then you just have to go, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And you really get good at putting your head down and just barreling ahead,
Mhm.
and not getting your feelings hurt. Yeah. And then after that, you think about, okay, who do I need to talk to for this story? So for the story about voters saying, I would like to vote for Elizabeth Warren, but I mean, by then, by the time I pitched the story, I already have a bunch of voters from a bunch of events telling me that.
Mhm.
I would probably go out to more events and get a few more just to confirm that I'm not barking up the wrong tree. Ask my colleagues if they're hearing that as well, because you don't
Mhm.
want to report on something that is a fluke that isn't really happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, you call up pollsters, you call up strategists, the people who get paid big money to tell campaigns how to campaign. You just talk to smart people about, okay, why is this happening? Has this happened before? Like, just to provide context.
Mhm.
And from there, you stitch it together. And for web, you write the story and it gets edited. For radio, you write the story and it gets edited, but you have very particular time constraints. And, morning edition will say, we're giving you 4 minutes, so make it 4 minutes. And so you might have to cut out something you really like. Less often you might have to pad it out, but I never have the problem of being too short. It's always too long. So yeah, you trim and cut and stitch it together. And yeah, and then very, very talented editor, like sound editing people,
Mhm.
put the package together and put it on the radio.
Okay. And how long would you say, from idea to end result? Is there a sort of an average turnaround to that time wise?
No, because I mean, it can vary so much, it's today Joe Biden gave a speech. Well, that story is going to be turned around within the day. And meanwhile, a story that's about a phenomenon, like I was telling you about voters are saying this, that could take a week, that could take a few days. It depends. I mean, I had a story this year that took me, long for my team, which is like a couple months. It's just stories that are more complex, where you need more examples and you need to make sure you are getting it right, talking to all of the right people to be fair, all of that. Those can take longer, and that's just me. I mean, people who do investigative reporting,
Mhm.
God, they can work on stories for months. They can do it for over a year. It can really, really, it varies so much by complexity.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Um, yeah, let's. You mentioned sort of what distinguishes NPR a little bit from other news outlets. Let's dive into some just strictly NPR stuff. Uh,
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, could you talk a little bit about how you? Well, I'll start from the beginning a little bit. Like making the transition to radio, was that anxiety inducing? Was this something that required you to watch some tutorials, or did you have to take any sort of workshops or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, speaking of having a thick skin, you get quite a bit, I got quite a bit more feedback once I got there. So we have what we call two ways, which is where I sit down with the host and the host is like, okay, Danielle, you've been covering the Supreme Court decision. What are you hearing out there? And I will say, well, Steve, blah, 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 blah. That's a two-way. And my first few of those, I mean, anyone's first few of those, it's nerve-wracking and it's unnatural because it's not a real conversation. I generally know what Steve is going to ask me. It's not fully scripted, but he knows what the big questions are. I know what the big questions are. It's, it's not hard. You just, it takes a while to learn that rhythm of like faking like you're having a conversation when really what you're trying to do is not inform Steve, but inform other people. So it's an odd way to do it, but it's a way that works.
Yeah. Is it some people that, I mean, you build a rapport with, that you can kind of do this song and dance a little bit of, I don't know, or is it, once you get the hang of it, it's kind of applicable to a lot of different environments?
Once you get the hang of it, I mean, you learn like very basic ways to do it better, which is always have a main point. And like I'm doing right now, always have bullet points. Like, no, here are the three things that I need to say in this answer, that it's very important for me to say in this answer. And also, like, very importantly, how to pivot. If he asks me, well, tell me specifically what Elena Kagan said. Like I haven't prepared for that. I don't know. I can't remember. Your brain goes blank. That totally happens. In which case you learn how to say, well, I don't know, Steve, but what I can tell you is this.
It's super confident.
Yeah, absolutely. It's again, being all about being concise and also about just barreling forward with your answer. And and trying to cut out ums and ahs as much as you can, but that's advanced. That's really, really hard, I think.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
God.
My palms are getting sweaty just having to explain that. I used to have a speech teacher in high school that had a little clicker that every time you said and like, you would click it in front of your face.
That's abuse. That's not right.
Definitely, yeah.
One other thing we have at NPR is we do have a voice coach.
Her
name is Jessica. She is this is not her only job. She's also an actress and a singer, like a theater around DC.
Yeah.
But she has you do a lot of really like kind of humbling, silly exercises, a lot like if you've ever done voice coaching, if you've ever done singing, if you've been in a choir and had to do weird voice warm-ups, she has you do those with her, and she listens to you read, she listens to you talk, and she's like, okay, you in particular, Danielle, here is a problem you have. You need to stop doing this and start doing this. And that really does help you figure out what your tics are, and also just what about your voice isn't translating well through a microphone. If you croak a little while you talk, is that okay? Or would you like to correct that? If you tend to talk up at the end of your sentences like this, like maybe you should stop doing that. That sort of thing.
I agree with not for you. I'm not saying you do that. I'm saying,
I do sometimes.
So yeah, I mean, there is kind of like an NPR voice, I feel like.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite as much as in the past, though. Maybe there's a little bit more variations in vocal styles. But yeah, I mean, is that, I didn't know if that's something that comes up with the voice coach, that there's a certain
yes, and I mean there's like I'm going to differentiate here a little between like style and voice. I mean, as far as voice goes, I think we have over the years gotten a bit more, as our newsroom has gotten more diverse, as we get more people from different parts of the country, parts of the world, that just makes things sound different. I had this coworker who has since left NPR, but who had a very thick North Carolina drawl. And I remember hearing him on the radio and being so refreshed, like, oh, we don't have a lot of that on our air.
Yeah, that would be noteworthy.
Yeah, and I like to think I bring the upper Midwestern Fargo-ish accent every once in a while. But so that's one thing. But and people of different races with different accents, all of that is great. There's also like how you read your stories, though. And it is, once again, it is unnatural. I when I first started reading my stories into a microphone, I would listen to it later, and I always sounded like I was half asleep, and I sounded just dead, and I felt so silly. I was like, what am I doing wrong? And my editor was like, you just have to ham it up more. You're going to feel insane, but you have to pick up that sheet and read it so you feel like you're going way over the top, and it's not going to sound over the top. And I have done this with my friends, like pick up a magazine, and when I was learning this, telling them like, this is how they want us to read things. And in person, it seems nuts because you sound way too excited about interest rates and way too excited about polling. But on the air, it sounds normal for whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like maybe stage makeup,
Yes. Yeah.
Take it on, and then the spotlight kind of evens it out. So for some of the shows that you've contributed to or guest hosted, maybe you could tell a story behind how you got to do that. So I was thinking for the NPR Politics podcast, you were involved in that fairly early on.
Yeah.
Its inception.
Yeah. So that started 2015, I think, or maybe early 2016. And I got to NPR in 2015. So it was there. I was pretty low in the pecking order when I got to NPR. And I was just really, really trying to be on air, period, and get more bylines, that sort of thing. So I bothered my boss quite a bit. And I was like, I mean, also it helps to listen to office gossip, because I was like, I hear we're having a podcast. You should let me help with it, please. And just putting my hand up for everything. I mean, so that's how I got involved early, but as it's gone on, it's like, for example, we have a book club right now where every couple months I will pick a book and tell our listeners hey, this is our book for February, you should go read it. And then I will solicit questions from you, and you should send them to me, and I will ask the author and interview the author, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh man, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, that was my idea. And so part of it is also just having ideas that the brass likes, and pitching them, and you get shot down. I've had, before that, I had many ideas get shot down, but this one they liked. So yeah. It
seems like a recurring theme that you just have to get used to getting rejected or getting negative feedback, or constructive criticism, I guess.
Yes,
you could
that is the
think of it. But I mean, that's it's hard for a lot of people to take or get used to. But
well, I mean,
it's probably healthy, like just as a human to be able to navigate that. But
it's healthy to an extent, but it can.
Some point you need the white flag, maybe.
Oh, well, I mean, when I started being on Twitter more, I used to have nightmares about Twitter, about people tweeting mean things at me. Like, some negative feedback is actually constructive. Like, hey, you did the story and you didn't talk to this group of people, and that seems wrong. And that sucks to hear, because you realize, I really made a mistake. I could have done that better.
Yeah.
But then, some feedback is genuinely mean-spirited. It's abusive. It's nasty words. I've had people
I couldn't
find
imagine.
my cell phone number somehow or my home address. And
Mhm.
like some of it is just downright creepy. And I
Yeah,
mean,
it's scary.
that's a different ball of wax. That is, I mean, and the thing is, on the one hand, it's feedback where it's not feedback that hurts you because you're like, this person is crazy and mean and I don't have to listen to them. And that's
Yeah.
great. But also it's like, I'm genuinely a little scared right now, and I don't enjoy that.
Yeah.
And we have ways of dealing with that, of like getting our information off the internet and
Mhm.
knowing there is a whole team of people at NPR with a list of listeners and readers who have bothered reporters in the past. So
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
thing we watch out for.
I mean, I could only imagine. And I wanted to ask about the weekend edition. I know
Mhm.
you guest hosted that, but you mentioned Twitter. When you send out tweets, are you like, you have over 50,000 people that follow you on Twitter. Uh, does that number, I don't know, does sort of the quantity of that amount of people, uh, is that on your brain when you're typing, or do you have to just play fast and loose? Like if you agonized over every single word or this or that, like you never tweet anything or you go crazy.
I
Uh,
mean,
right.
you can't be too fast and loose because you'll get fired. So it's. I mean, a lot of what I tweet, I've been on Twitter less and less lately because we don't have to get into this, but after Elon Musk took over, it's just
Mhm.
people complaining and people being
Yeah.
mad and people saying horrible things. Like it's just no fun
Mhm.
anymore. But in general, I I you just kind of learn how to self-edit really well.
Yeah.
And to know what you can and can't say. Like a lot of what I tweet ends up being, here's a thing I wrote, you should click on it.
Yeah.
Uh, or explaining a thing I wrote, like, hey, here's a thing I found. For more, go
Mhm.
read here. Or here's a thing my colleague wrote. It's really great.
Mhm.
There's a lot of that. Or it's just like very unobjectionable stuff. Like, I just saw this movie, it's great. I read
Yeah.
this book,
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah.
Or it's really dumb jokes. I mean, you get used to talking without necessarily saying a whole lot. That's maybe a too self-deprecating way of putting it, but you don't really get to voice your personal opinions on the things you're reporting on. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm certainly not about to get on Twitter and say candidate X is the worst. They're
Mhm.
terrible. I certainly, that would be absolutely silly. I mean, you learn it's the rule with Twitter, I guess, is kind of like the rule with anything you're writing about. Like, you're certainly not going to write an article that says, don't vote for Bob Jones. Bob Jones is the worst.
Mhm.
You can say Bob Jones's campaign fundraising accounts show some questionable activity, and it
Mhm.
appears he has been lying about XYZ. Here is the proof. Like, you just have to be able to back
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
every single thing.
Mhm.
Or again, it's not, you wouldn't say Bob Jones is a terrible person, but hey, he said a few racist things in the last month.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
And we're going to highlight them right here. And
Mhm.
you always, I mean, this is also just a journalistic thing. You always ask for comment. If you're going to accuse someone of something, you say, like, well, you get the opportunity to defend yourself. So you call them up,
Mhm.
and ideally on Twitter, you do something of the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that's something that probably takes practice, over time, just to
Yes.
be able to just write in a journalistic sort of way, like you're giving sort of verifiable uh, information that I don't know. I just think it's interesting what you were saying there, and for like your blog and for Twitter, it seems like that's sort of an avenue where you can invoke more humor too. It gives you just more creative license to do that, which seems kind of nice.
Yeah, it just can't be related to my job. So, I mean, I can talk about,
Yeah.
you know, this is a bad example, but what I'm cooking, or,
Yeah.
I'll write about the experience of reporting a story. Like,
Mhm.
I went out here to this place and it was really difficult because voters didn't want to talk to me about
Mhm.
such and such. Or, it can sort of reflect on my career more. And generally that seems to be acceptable. I haven't had anyone yell at me about it yet, but my career is young. It's still
So
happening.
far, so good. Knock on wood. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So for my last few questions, before I open it up to the crowd, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about just the weekend edition and what that was like to host, and then maybe just some news stories or interviews that stick out to you as noteworthy in the time you've been a reporter. And then after maybe you touch on some of those things, I do want to bring up a few pictures from
Ooh,
and have you explain the story behind the picture.
okay.
So yeah, we're um, I think we'll be able to open it up to the public for questions in a
Yeah.
little bit, but I had a few other things I wanted to cover first. But yeah, if you could talk a little bit about Weekend Edition first, and then maybe
Yeah.
some notable stories / interviews.
Yeah. So I have, what Damien is talking about is I have guest hosted Weekend Edition, which is our weekend morning show. It's on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm not exactly sure what time it's on in Iowa, maybe 8. Check your local listings. You should tune in. But yeah, I mean, once you've been around NPR enough and they can trust you in front of a live mic, you can be a substitute host for some of these shows. So I have substitute hosted Weekend Edition a couple of times, and it's a new set of muscles, different from the ones that I've been telling Damien about. One that is perhaps the hardest is when you're doing a live interview and you're sitting in the studio, you have your headphones on, your mic, and over there, behind that window, you have the people running the show, the people putting it together, telling you when to talk, telling you when to stop. And you're interviewing, like I was interviewing the mayor of New York City one morning, or the mayor-elect. He wasn't the mayor yet, Eric Adams. But like a lot of people, especially important people or people who think they're important, he had a lot to say. But you only have 4 minutes for this interview. You really can't go over. And so you have to learn how to keep your eye on the clock, think about what you want to ask, listen to the guy, and also be willing to cut off this person who is used to talking for a living.
Man, that sounds so hard.
So to eventually be like, all right, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much. And to sound polite while you're doing it. And instead of saying like, shut up. Like that part is hard. So that was definitely a skill to learn. But I mean, but also like if you're hosting a show, it's fun. You have a team of people who are really good at putting a show together, who aren't going to let you screw up too bad. And also often you're talking to reporters that you know and like from around the newsroom. So it can be really fun. I'll talk to my colleagues who are out covering the White House and be like, hey, Scott. And, Scott is a person who I will get drinks with or hang out with. I know his kids. And yeah, so I mean, often it's fun. It's kind of
that does sound fun. That sounds way less scary than what I was expecting to.
Oh, it's terrifying at first, but I mean, the parts of it that are fun, you really get to sort of like lean into. Yeah. You did ask about stories that have really stuck with me.
Yeah, or interviews that you've done. You mentioned the mayor of New York, Eric Adams.
Yeah, there was one.
Other...
Yeah, there was one I did a couple years ago. I did it for a podcast we have called Throughline, and it's about the history of different phenomena, the history of policing and the history of and I helped put together an episode on a history of women running for president. And I talked to a woman named Pat Schroeder. She was a Democrat from Colorado. And in 1988, yes, 1988, she was exploring a run for the presidency. And she, was well liked, well respected, and was doing relatively well, but eventually decided to drop out. And when she dropped out, she got up to the mic and she stopped. She said, I'm going to drop out of the race. And then she stopped and her voice broke. And it sounded like she was about to cry. And then she went on. But the story became Pat Schroeder cried during a speech. Holy cow. And so I went to her home in Florida and interviewed her. And I mean, first of all, she was just a delightful woman. And like it was right before Christmas, and she showed me her Christmas tree and like all the ornaments her grandkids had given her, all that. It was wonderful. But also, it was just fascinating to listen to this person who is decades older than me talk about sexism, talk about the sexism she has faced, and how different it is, and yet how very not different it is from what people like, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, any number of women candidates, Hillary Clinton most definitely have faced in recent years. I've been thinking about this also since you asked how Northern Iowa shaped who I am and what I care about. I mean, because a lot of whether I've been covering economics or politics, I do a lot about gender, and I do a lot about sexism. And I do think that it's maybe controversial to say, but coming from where I did, it became clear to me from a young age that yes, women and men both worked in Titonka, Buffalo Center, wherever, but it always felt to me like the world revolved around men, because men are farmers, and the economy around where we grew up is a farming economy. I mean, the town revolves around the grain elevator and crop prices, and that's just the reality of it. Is that's where a lot of families get their money. But it did cause me to wonder a fair amount, why are there no women farmers? Why are girls not encouraged to become farmers, that sort of thing. And it's not that I desperately wanted to raise corn or pigs when I grew up, but it got me really thinking about what does it mean for there to be gender norms? What does it mean for boys to be pushed down this path and girls to be pushed down this path? What does it mean for boys to be more important than girls, and for the men's jobs to be more important than the women's jobs, or more respectable, and so I think I that kind of thinking comes in when I'm talking to Pat Schroeder, when I'm talking to pretty much anybody, man or woman, thinking about how I wonder how being a man, being a woman formed how you think about your politics right now, especially this year with the Supreme Court abortion ruling. I mean, the gender politics were just central to everything that I talk to people about. Yeah.
I mean, that's you mentioned earlier. I don't mean to make anything about me or anything, but
please.
just being a little bit of an outsider myself, you start to, I don't know, see the lay of the land wherever you're living. And I'd say no matter where I've lived, and Rachel and I'll talk about this, but just sort of gender being the most central organizing principle in our realities. From Cincinnati to wherever. But yeah, it seems like those gender divisions be more pronounced in North Iowa compared to some other places I've lived. But I don't know. I would, when I asked that question, I thought maybe in an abstract sense that would be something that would come up.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have it on the brain so much, but once you start looking at things like that, it's hard to stop,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
When the president is passing an infrastructure bill, or Congress is passing, not just the president, often infrastructure refers to, building roads and building bridges and building. And that's
Mhm.
all great. It is economically necessary. That is true. But people who are watching may remember there was a push a year ago, something like that, from some Democrats to start calling things like childcare, to call them human infrastructure, because a lot of
Yeah,
work
yeah.
in the economy can't get done without that. And often the regular infrastructure jobs are quite male focused, road building, for example. And often the human infrastructure, if that's what you want to call it, jobs are female focused. I did do a story on that as well, because um, it all becomes a question of how you label things. What do you see as foundational? And doing that story really got people to talk to me about, it's more interesting than it sounds, but about definitions. Like, how do you think about this? Why is this infrastructure and why is this not? And you
Yeah.
can apply that to any number of other topics,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's it just things are so ingrained. You just sort of have these default sort of categories or phylums. You put information into your brain,
Yeah.
and a lot of it's just like you were saying. It's just a lot of it's gendered,
Yeah.
whether you really explicitly like deconstruct it or not.
Well, and that's the thing. Often it's not deconstructed.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I see that as part of my job. I mean, a lot of reporters do this on race, on class. I mean, there are a
yeah.
lot of different parts of people's identities that do not get talked about, that do not get deconstructed. And I think that is one thing that journalism is doing better and better, certainly
Mhm.
better than when we were kids, is dissecting, okay, how does this person, this community's view on XYZ change? How is it different from other places, given that everybody here is Latino, given that everybody here is older, given that everybody here is an evangelical Christian, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And that I think that's really helpful for helping people see outside of the spheres that they live in,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of going back to what you said earlier in our conversation too about sort of like expanding your definition of what constitutes Americana too.
Oh
Um,
yeah, most definitely.
and it's like I think that's cool. You can go into your journalistic endeavors with that sort of at the forefront of your brain. That I don't know. There's no one sort of sector that has a monopoly on at least an American identity, and maybe all these other identities are part of that conglomeration.
Yeah,
But
most definitely. Yeah.
yeah. Can we look at some pictures before we
Sure.
so,
I'm
all
nervous.
right.
Yeah.
I just got these off your Facebook. So I shamelessly stole this from a YouTube interview show called Hot Ones, where people eat progressively hotter wings and answer questions. And the second interview is called Explain This Gram. These are from
Okay.
your Facebook, and I'm going to share the screen, and we'll just go through. We don't have to go through all of them, but maybe just a few of them. Screen share. All right. Showing up for you. All right. Slideshow. Beginning. All right. So I'll have to preface this picture with something, a little nugget that I learned right before. I thought that was my brother-in-law Joe Wick in the background. It's actually my wife's ex-boyfriend.
Yeah. You're wading into touchy territory here, man. I don't know.
But yeah, what's the story behind this picture? I mean, what are you doing?
One winter, I mean, clearly it's winter, years ago when I was home for Christmas, Dad got borrowed a couple of semi-automatic rifles from a friend. I don't remember who, and also if I try to get the model and make of the rifles right here, I will embarrass myself. So I'll just say semi-automatic rifles. And he was like, hey, it was just a whole thing of like, hey, do you want to shoot? And I was like, well, I never turned down an experience. So me, Dad, Joe, my other brother-in-law, and Jared, who is my little sister's ex-boyfriend, we all went outside and shot it. I don't know, coffee cans and
No explosive targets though.
you actually they
Oh
got
wait, there was. Rachel just confirmed there was.
one of the things was a God, I swear to God, there was a pumpkin that Dad or Joe had hollowed out and put explosive powder in it. And so,
Man, so you guys did it up right. You just went 0 to 100 on the firing range. Or skip the 22 rifle and just go straight for the high power.
I posted these on my Facebook, and my friends from college and out here in DC lost it. Oh, there we go. That's me, Rachel, and
that's my wife, Rachel.
Yeah,
and Danielle, obviously. So what's where was this?
Minneapolis, near the Target Center, because we saw Garth Brooks perform at the Target Center in again, I couldn't tell you the year. It's been a little while. But we were waiting for our other sister and her family and her husband's family to show up. So we went to this bar and had a couple of beers, and some people had a giant Garth Brooks head, and we thought, why not? You need a photo with it.
Well, obviously. Yeah, all right.
It was a formative.
What's your favorite Garth Brooks song? You got to go to number one.
Oh, my favorite Garth Brooks song. I like there's one called Much Too Young to Feel This Damn Old. It's an older one. I really like that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not familiar, but yeah. So what it says 2017.
Yes.
Did you do the whole thing, or was it
Yeah, so a few colleagues from, and you can see I'm wearing an NPR shirt there. A few colleagues from NPR and I have done RAGBRAI together as a team a few times. I've done it 3 times. Yeah. And that is, I don't remember what the town is anymore. It might have been West Bend actually, but at any rate,
cool. Shout out to Kasuth.
Different, I'm sure people listening know because they are Iowans, so I don't have to explain this to them the way I have to everyone else. Different towns, have different attractions, and this particular town had, get your photo taken with a pig, and I was like,
okay,
sounds good. I know how to handle a pig, clearly.
So you didn't have to shampoo this one though, did you?
No, I didn't, thank God.
All right.
He was pretty clean. Oh my God. Oh, this.
So tell me about this celebrity encounter.
Oh, it is hard for me to convey the joy. I love Ernie so much. He was my favorite Sesame Street character.
That was going to be my next question. What was your favorite?
Oh, Ernie, are you kidding? So at NPR, there's a thing called the Tiny Desk, which is it's not really that tiny. It's a desk. It's a normal size desk. But it is where they have different musicians come in and do concerts there. And it's become a big deal.
Yeah.
A few years ago, they did a Sesame Street Tiny Desk. And a lot of people with kids brought their kids in to see it. And it was really cool. But I guess the puppeteers and the puppets got there way early. And I was on the metro on my way in. And my coworker, Scott, texted me and he was like code red. Ernie is in the building. You have to get here now. And so I got off the train and ran and went in. And here are the puppeteers with the different, I can't remember what other puppets were there, but the puppeteers were just loving this because they're coming up to all of us adults and we're all just melting and damn near crying, because
I know it's like such a part of your childhoods. At least
they were doing the voices and everything. I didn't have a conversation with the puppeteer. I had a conversation with Ernie.
That's wild.
And it was just
I love it.
Yeah.
Man. So you mentioned the Tiny Desk. I think this was Ben Folds.
Yeah.
Is there any other, obviously you saw Ben Folds. Is there any other musicians that really struck out? Or stuck out to you as like really good performers?
I mean, Ben Folds is great. I love him. So it was really great to see him.
Yeah, that's so cool.
One thing that I really enjoy is when they bring in classical performers. Um, uh, there is this, I think he's Russian. I'm probably getting that wrong.
Mm.
This pianist named Daniel Trifonov who came in and played Chopin once. And it's just to watch someone be that outrageously talented from like
Yeah.
15 feet away is just incredible, so
Yeah.
I
So
really love.
that is the tiny desk right there. And your desk isn't
Yes.
too far away from where that's at. Like, are you just down the hall?
Yeah. This is not my finest photography. Often at the tiny desk, you're
Oh,
kind of back and holding up your phone.
very
Yeah,
cool.
oh God.
So, this isn't a gotcha, but
So
you look like you're
my
really there's some
I
white
was
shirt.
I was telling
shirt.
people what was what. So my partner Neil, we got married last year, but at this point we weren't married yet. He is on a thing called the National Books Council, which
Mhm.
is a group that puts on the National Book Awards. And so we got to go to the National Book Awards a few years ago, and it was great. It was, I geeked out quite a bit. There's all these famous authors everywhere,
Yeah.
and you just try not to, embarrass yourself in front of them. But after the awards were done, there's just cocktail hour, et cetera, et cetera. And so I wanted a photo at the podium. And so I swear to God, I didn't give a speech. I just got up and faked giving a speech.
Yeah, I mean, you had to take that photo opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. I know this guy from Parks and Rec. I want to open it up to Q&A, but I wanted you to explain this one as well.
Yes. So this is from the White House Christmas party in 2016. And so clearly you can see there's Barack and Michelle Obama. The other guy there is Domenico Montanaro, who is a coworker of mine. And a very, very nice thing that happened that year is that so different journalists get an official invite to the White House holiday party. And I did not get one. I have yet to get a personal one, but Domenico got one. And so
Oh, cool.
all of the older journalists on our desk and more established people brought us less established, shall we say, people as their dates that year. So I was Domenico's date.
Yeah.
So yeah, and if you want, you can stand in line and get a photo with the president. And
Just glancing at it, I mean, that looks like a genuine laugh or smile coming from
I'm not getting into that story. I may have embarrassed myself. Look, the eggnog at the White House party is very strong. I may have made a fool of myself.
You could say though that like you cracked a joke that the president found legitimately funny.
I think he just wondered who is this idiot who's standing next to me. Hey, look, at least my hair and my dress look good. I'm not going to complain.
That's right. All right, Danielle, thank you for answering my questions, going through some pictures. I want to stop the share. And yeah, we started with 16 people, and I think we still have 16 people.
Heck yeah. Thanks for sticking around, everybody.
But yeah, when I was teaching on using Zoom, like there was a way for students to raise their hand. I don't know if that's an option. I didn't somehow I didn't think of this.
Huh.
But yeah, if someone has a question, I can, if you let's see, you shoot me a chat message. And I can unmute you. So I don't know if you see at the bottom of your screen, there's a little bubble that says chat. Click on that, type, and it'll come to me. You don't have to write your question. Just say you got a question, and I'll unmute you. Or you know what? We could just unmute everybody and.
Oh God, let's have a free for all.
My mom already messaged me saying I can't get my sound to work.
Vicky, I hope you did.
Sorry, Mom. Just have to check the YouTube clip. Yeah, I mean, maybe I just maybe we just covered everything, Danielle.
That's probably true. We did
There's
it perfect.
There's just nothing left. But is yeah, I'm trying to see like who else here. I see some familiar names and faces. What's up, Neil?
He's watching downstairs.
Tyler Harms, man. Tyler Harms gave a great library presentation not too long
Oh,
ago.
is this on the Titonka Brewing Company?
Oh, no, Tyler was
Oh, okay.
Secret Lives of Marsh Birds. He did some
Oh,
ornithology.
I was going through the Titonka Public Library page, and I think I flipped past the.
Yeah, Jeff Brandt did
Oh, okay.
a really cool one on his up and coming brewery. I got to get a sample pack for the holidays.
Absolutely.
But anyway, if no one has any questions, I guess we can wrap it up. Thanks,
Hey,
Danielle.
Danny,
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, sure thing, Tyler. I wasn't sure if people could unmute themselves. But yeah, if you got a question, feel free to unmute and fire away.
Cool. Thanks very much, Danielle. This was great. It's great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Did you ever get nervous? And do you, if so, do you still get nervous?
You mean going on air, or?
Yeah.
A little, like there's always some adrenaline, especially with breaking news, like the day that the Supreme Court Dobbs decision dropped, the one that overturned Roe. It was just such big news, and I was a little bit taken aback because we weren't, we didn't know when to expect it. That I found myself a little lost for words at first. And you learn how to recover from that. And I think I acknowledged it. I said something like, as you can tell, this is huge news to me too. I think a lot of people are shocked, and you kind of talk it off and keep going. I do get nervous still in what we call press scrums, which is after a candidate gives a speech, the reporters all run over and try to talk to them. And you're in this like little group of reporters, and you all have your mics, and you're trying to get them forward and towards the candidate. And you try to yell your question loud enough that the candidate can hear you. And first of all, that is another unnatural thing to do, is just go up to someone and start screaming. So that took some time to learn how to do. And then once you get it always freaks me out, because once I get the candidate's attention, it feels like, boy, this question had better be good because I just yelled at someone. Every time it gets me all tense, and my mouth goes dry. And like, don't ask a dumb question in front of the other reporters. So yes, I get nervous at that, most definitely. On the air, less than I used to, which is a blessing, because I used to get terribly nervous. Yeah.
Do you have a cassette tape recorder that you hold over the
No,
when you
we
yell your
have
questions?
little digital recorders with these tiny little memory cards, but we have these big, I should have brought some of my equipment out, these big mics that the main one we use is called a shotgun mic because it has a grip. It's called a pistol grip. There's a lot of gun imagery here, but a long mic that extends out from it, and you hold it and you point it at someone, not unlike a shotgun. But yes, you kind of try to wiggle that through the crowd and get it up toward a candidate. It is a piece of equipment that airport security often wants to check out. So you got to leave extra time for that.
Oh, I bet.
Danielle, this is Larry Hill.
Hi,
We're very proud of you as a North Iowa graduate, by the way. So
thank you.
the Kurtzleben girls have a memory just burned into my head of the past. So one of the things that I enjoy about your reporting is that, and I think it came across today too, is this idea that you really work hard to give those who don't have a voice. And I want to thank you for that. But where does that come from in your background?
I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, I would like to think that I've just always been naturally empathetic and kind. But I mean, I don't know. If I had to guess, I think my parents were my parents are very fair people, and they I think we're pretty good at teaching us how to, just like whether other kids are popular or not popular, whether just be nice to everybody. It's the right thing to do, I mean, so there's that. I guess I don't know what else in my background. I think part of it is also, I mean, not to take the air out of this too much. Some of it is also just wanting to get things right, if like the best way to make sure your story isn't wrong is to talk to everyone, like to do 20 more interviews than you need to do, so in terms of talking to the voiceless or people who maybe aren't represented well or often enough, I like during COVID, I got moved to the econ desk for a bit just because the economy was in crisis and they needed more people to report on that. I talked to a lot of small business owners who were really, really hit hard by the crisis. And about the government, doing a bad job of explaining this. There was a big government program called the Paycheck Protection Plan, which people might remember, the PPP, that was designed to help small business owners. And I reported a lot on it. And when I would catch wind that, hey, this program isn't working as well as perhaps it could or should, it was yes, I wanted to talk to all of the small business owners, first of all, to get their stories out there. But second of all, quite frankly, because I wanted to make sure that if I'm saying this program doesn't work, I want to have enough examples that of it not working, that I can back up this story. And if and when some government spokesperson comes to me and says, hey, your story's unfair, so I can say, no, it's not actually, because I talked to all these people. So smoke that. Yeah, I mean, it's so yes, some of it is born of empathy and being nice, and some of it is also born of just wanting to not shortchange a story and wanting to get it right. Yeah, it was nice to see you, Larry.
Hey, does anybody else have any questions? If so, just hit that unmute button and you can fire away. That question kind of reminded me too a little bit. Maybe psychoanalyzing myself more than, I don't mean to speak for you or anything, but I think that maybe where I grew up, and maybe to an extent where you grew up, going back to the question from earlier, I think there's a certain underdog mentality that you can have as well. I'm not trying to speak for you, Danielle, but I'm just throwing some stuff out there into the ether. But yeah, I think that might, I don't know. Do you think that could maybe lend into something about wanting to cover different types of perspectives? Or
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, because it is true that like I said earlier, there is no real America, and that's true. It is also true, like, for example, covering the Iowa caucuses. And I think it can be very easy for reporters, especially reporters from urban areas, from affluent suburban areas, that sort of thing, to report on rural areas and rural people, or just anyone not like them, kind of as if they were zoo animals, to tip from, here, I'm going to provide concrete details about this town, to, would you look at the people here? I am an important reporter who has gone far afield to do a story on the simple folks of such and such. I was just reading a story like this today and damn near threw my phone across the room. I mean, I think knowing that and thinking about that, I try to represent people just as if they are, God, this sounds so corny and also kind of stonerish, represent people as if they're people, and not just an avenue for me or NPR to show like, haha, look, we are out in the world talking to the simple folk of
Yeah, no, and
wherever.
I
Yeah.
think that's such an important aspect to have in the media, though. And you know, I mean, all the questions we talked about, I felt like that was the one question that I found most interesting. I thought your answer was really nuanced, and I would like to like go back and listen to it after I record or finish recording it. Is that, you know, I can get the sense that that even from, we all have our different identities,
Mhm.
but for me it's like my dad was a truck driver. I live in rural America now, and I've lived in New York City, and there is a certain sort of like inherent condescending sort of tone sometimes.
Well,
I
New
think maybe
Yorkers
like
think New
directed at
York.
people that I love, people that it's like that's my
Sure.
home.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, New York is a special case. New Yorkers think New York is the center of the world.
yeah, I know, man. That's maybe an
Good for
outlier.
them. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think to maybe broaden that out a bit, I think any group of people who sees themselves and or gets portrayed as central as the default, um, once you have that, any out group or group that isn't, white, urban, straight, male, etc., like any
Yeah.
college educated, any number of things, any person who is not in those categories, you really run the risk of writing a story about them. And first of all, them, whoever,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
treating them like they are, out there and we're in
Right.
here. So we are going like, what are Latinos thinking? Why are they voting? Like, like sometimes the stories really have that tone. And I
Yeah,
always
yeah.
think, are we doing this? Like, is there a different way we
Mhm,
can cover any given group,
mhm.
yeah, so that's kind of yes, that's a thing I think about a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think NPR is an important voice in sort of like the media realm. Like I appreciate the mission, appreciate the work you do, and I thank you for taking the time out to talk to the Titonka Public Library and
Yeah,
share a little insight onto journalism. And we could go on and on about the nature of objectivity and reliable sources.
let's
And
not.
but you know what? We got Christmas on the horizon.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I want to thank you. I'm so glad that someone so wonderful is running the Titonka Public Library. And I'm not just saying that because you're my brother-in-law.
and keep spreading the rumor.
You are you are a credit to Titonka. And also, hey, everyone, listen to Iowa Public Radio and
Oh
donate
yeah,
to Iowa Public Radio because they do great work. I know the reporters there. They are wonderful people. And yeah, support local newspapers and local journalism.
yeah, for sure. Yep. All right, Danielle. Well, I'm sure we'll be talking soon. And for everybody else, thanks for listening. And I'll have a YouTube link posted hopefully later tonight. But yeah, take care. Have a safe few days. Brave the weather. Stay warm, and have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Okay. Bye,
Take care,
everyone.
Danielle. Bye bye. Oh. In the meeting.